Part 71 of Modern Domestic Cookery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Modern Domestic Cookery by William Augustus Henderson. The New Family Receipt Book, Section 3. Mr. Jane's Patent Method of Preserving Eggs. Various have been the expedients by which good housewives have endeavored to preserve eggs. They have, in turns, been kept in salt, in flour, and in bran. They have been scalded in hot water and deposited at the bottom of a cold running stream. They have been steeped in vinegar, and they have been bathed with oil. None of these expedients, however, seem to be universally approved, though each has had its respective advocates and been warmly recommended to attention. In the year 1791, a patent was obtained by Mr. William Jane for his newly invented composition calculated to preserve eggs. The specification of Mr. Jane, whose patent expired, of course, in the year 1805, directs that, for preparing his composition, a Winchester bushel of quick or unslacked lime, 2 pounds of common salt, and ½ pound of cream of tartar should be incorporated with such a quantity of common water as may reduce the mixture to a state of consistence in which an egg will float within its top above the surface. In this liquid, the eggs are to be constantly kept for use, and the patentee asserts that they will thus certainly be preserved perfectly sound for at least 2 years. Chinese mode of rendering all sorts of cloth, and even muslin, waterproof. By the following very simple process for making cloth waterproof, it is asserted that the Chinese render not only all the strongest cloths, but even the most open muslins, impenetrable to the heaviest showers of rain. Nor yet, as it is said, will this composition fill up the interstices of the finest lawn, or in the slightest degree injure the most brilliant colors. The composition to which these valuable qualities are imputed is merely a solution of ½ ounce of white wax in a pint of spirits of turpentine. In a sufficient quantity of the mixture made with these materials, immerse the articles intended to be rendered waterproof, and then hang them in the open air till they become perfectly dry. This is all the process necessary for accomplishing so desirable a purpose, again which, however, may be objected, perhaps, the expense and the unpleasant scent of the turpentine spirits. The latter objection may be remedied by using equal parts of spirit of wine and oil of wormwood, a mixture of which is said to dissipate the smell of turpentine, but the former, it is not to be denied, must necessarily be, at the same time, in some degree, augmented. It has lately been attempted, in England, to render the use of waterproof cloth general. Beautiful, newly discovered golden yellow dye for silks, cotton, etc. This fine, lively, and durable yellow dye has recently been discovered by Mr. Latziere, who thus describes the process by which it is obtained from the shaggy spunk, or Boletus hirsutus of Linnaeus, a species of mushroom, or fungus, growing chiefly on apple or walnut trees. This vegetable substance is replete with coloring matter, which must be expressed by pounding in a mortar, after which the liquid thus acquired is to be boiled about 1/4 hour. 6 pints of water may be well tinged for dyeing by a single ounce of the expressed fluid. This being strained, the silk, cotton, etc., intended to be dyed must be immersed and boiled in it for about 15 or 20 minutes. When fine silk, in particular, if it be afterwards passed through soft soap water, will appear of a bright golden yellow hue, equal in luster to that of the silk hitherto imported from China at a great expense for imitating gold embroidery. In short, every sort of stuff retains a fine yellow color, but it is, of course, less bright on linen and cotton. Nor is the use of this vegetable substance confined to dyeing, since it has been ascertained that the yellow extract which it yields is applicable to the purposes of painting, both in oil and in watercolors. Curious method of breeding an innumerable quantity of the beautiful gold and silver fish. The curious process by which this is to be easily effected may be in general applied on a larger scale to the breeding in equal profusion most of our esculent freshwater fish. It is simply as follows. Get a deep cistern or vat of any dimensions, but one of about 4 feet diameter and nearly the same height or depth will very well answer the purpose. Then take a quantity of birch or small faggot wood, which has been previously soaked some time in a stream, spring, or pond, so as to have lost all power of discoloring or giving any further taste to fresh water, and lay this wood all along the bottom, to the thickness of about a foot, in some parts at least having large stones on the top to keep it from rising or motion. Being thus certain that neither the vat nor the birch can spoil the water, nearly fill it with the best soft water from a river or pond, such as there can be no doubt that fish will be able to live in. The vat, it is to be observed, must be placed in the open air, but not in too cold or exposed situation, and the breeding is to commence in the spring, when the fish are full and just ready to spawn. Choose as breeders 4 hard-roed or females, and only 1 soft-roed milcher or male. Put the 5, with all possible care not to hurt them, into the vat, feeding them occasionally by throwing in a few crumbs of bread or some other trifling food, but in no other way disturbing them. When they appear quite thin, or shotten, as it is termed, they must be quietly taken out with a small net, so as by no means to disturb the spawn, and entirely kept away, as they would, if allowed to remain, such is the nature of these and most other fish, soon devour the greatest part of the spawn and small fry, suffering little or none ever to reach maturity. The vat must not be disturbed during the whole summer. Only as the water decreases, a little fresh must from time to time be as gently as possible poured in to supply the deficiency. In the course of the summer, the vivified roes will be hatched, and the water perceived swarming with minute fry, fully sufficient to stock a large piece of water, if not devoured by other fish or the several birds which make fish their prey. By this method, myriads of these beautiful fish may be easily bred, and consequently become very common. At present, it is true, though originally introduced from the East Indies, of which, as well as of China, the gold fish, or Cyprinus auratus of Linnaeus, is a native, it is still chiefly kept in glass globular vessels for ornament. It has, however, within these few years, been sufficiently ascertained that these fishes thrive and propagate in ponds or other reservoirs of water, where they are said to acquire a much larger growth and come to greater perfection than in Oriental countries. Syrup of red cabbage, as prepared in France. Cut and wash a large red cabbage, put it into a pot covered with water, and let it simmer 3 or 4 hours over a moderate fire, till there only remains about a pint of liquor. Then strain it through a sieve, pressing the cabbage forcibly to get all the juice. Let the liquor stand some hours to settle, and pour off the clear. Put a pound of Narbonne honey in a saucepan over a stove with a glass of water, and keep skimming it all the time it is boiling, till it be completely clarified. Then put in the cabbage juice, and make the whole boil to the consistence of syrup, which is always to be known by taking a little of it on one finger and finding that, on its being rubbed against the next, it forms a thread which does not instantly break. This syrup is regarded in France as a most excellent fortifier of the breast. It is undoubtedly a good pectoral syrup, very pleasant, not at all expensive, and easily made. A decoction of red cabbage, even in England, by some eminent physicians, has been frequently recommended for softening acrimonious humors, in disorders of the breast, and also in hoarseness. Boluses for the rheumatism and contractions of the joints. Bruise 4 cloves of garlic with 2 drams of gum ammonia and make them into 6 boluses with spring water. Take one every morning and evening, drinking plentifully of sassafras tea at least twice a day while using this medicine. This is said to be a most effectual remedy for the rheumatism and equally good in contractions of the joints. Pill for an aching hollow tooth. Take half a grain each of opium and yellow subsulfate of quicksilver, formerly called turpeth mineral. Make them into a pill and place it in the hollow of the tooth some hours before bedtime, with a small piece of wax over the top, when it is said never to fail effecting a complete cure. It was originally communicated with many other medical receipts by a learned physician at York. Tea for the gout. Take the leaves of Cardus benedictus, or the holy thistle, with a sufficient proportion of angelica leaves to make it palatable, but not much of either at a time, and drink half a pint of this infusion made like common tea, rather weak, constantly every morning for 12 months. This is said to have alone relieved several persons who were almost crippled with the gout. The leaves of the blessed thistle, in strong decoction, are generally agreed to be beneficial where there is a loss of appetite, or the stomach has been impaired by irregularities, and, whether an infusion be made in cold or warm water, it occasions, if drank freely, a copious perspiration, and greatly promotes the secretions. The dried leaf, which may be used for making the tea recommended, loses much of that forbidding flavor always possessed by the fresh plant, and which occasions it to be sometimes employed in strong decoctions, either as an emetic or as the auxiliary of an emetic. Infallible powder for shortness of breath. This excellent remedy for shortness of breath is particularly recommended to young ladies. The powder is thus directed to be made. Take an ounce each of caraway seeds and anise seeds, half an ounce of licorice, a large nutmeg, an ounce of prepared steel, and 2 ounces of double refined sugar. Reduce the whole into a very fine powder, and take as much as will lie on a shilling every morning fasting, and the same quantity at 5 in the afternoon. It will be requisite to use exercise while taking this medicine, which generally very soon effects a cure. Where any invincible prejudice against the use of steel exists in the mind, the medicine may be tried without it. It will even then frequently afford relief. Excellent wash for numbed or trembling hands. These disagreeable complaints are said to be soon remedied by the very simple expedient of frequently washing the hands so affected in a strong decoction of wormwood and mustard seed, to be strained and used when cold. Mustard whey for a palsy and nervous disorders. Turn half a pint of boiling milk by putting in a tablespoonful of made mustard. Strain the whey from the curd through a sieve and drink it in bed. This will give a generous and glowing warmth, the whey thus conveying the mustard into the constitution. Dr. Stephen Hales says that he knew a woman who had a great degree of numbness all over her, remarkably relieved with 2 doses only, and mentions several instances where it has done good in nervous cases and in palsy, greatly abating the malady and prolonging life. Ingenious French vegetative liquid for making bulbous roots flower beautifully in ornamental glasses without earth during the winter season. Dissolve gradually in a glazed earthen or glass vessel 3 ounces of saltpeter, 1 ounce of common salt, and half an ounce of salt of tartar with a pint of rainwater. When the solution is completed, add half an ounce of loaf sugar. Filter the whole through a bag or blotting paper and keep it bottled for use. Into each flower glass filled with rain or river water are to be put 8 or 10 drops of this liquid. The glasses must be kept constantly full, and the water renewed every 10th or 12th day at farthest, to which must always be added the requisite number of drops of the vegetative liquor. To ensure complete success, however, the glasses ought to stand on a mantel or chimney piece where a fire is regularly kept in cold weather. The fibers of the roots must of course always imbibe the liquid, and, with proper management, a fine succession of flowers may be kept up during the most rigorous seasons, such as crocuses of different colors, tulips, hyacinths, snowdrops, etc. Art of extracting the finest carmine powder from clippings of scarlet cloth. That incomparable crimson color called carmine, which so beautifully participates in the most delicate tints of scarlet and of purple, is so very expensive that miniature painters are often induced to substitute for carmine a composition of lake. By the following process, however, it is credibly asserted that a better carmine may with certainty be manufactured than much of what is imported from France. Take 5 or 6 gallons of the purest water and dissolve it in a sufficient quantity of potash to make a strong lay. After having filtered the solution, put it in a brass pot and boil in it a pound of the clean shreds or clippings of the finest scarlet broadcloth dyed in grain till they have entirely lost their color. Then squeeze the shreds and pass all the lay through a flannel bag. Dissolve 2 pounds of alum in a proper quantity of water and add this solution to the lay. Stir them well together and the whole will become rather thick. It is then to be repassed through the flannel bag and the liquor will run out clear. But if it be at all tinged, it is again to be boiled with the addition of a small quantity of dissolved alum and passed through the bag a 3rd time, when all the carmine will be left behind. Fresh water is then to be poured repeatedly into the bag till all the alum is washed away, after which the color must be dried so as to prevent any dust from settling on it, and being previously reduced to an impalpable powder on glass or marble, it will be immediately fit for use. Substitute for verdigris in producing a fine black dye without injury to cloth, etc. As verdigris, though generally combined with logwood for dyeing black, is extremely apt to corrode the texture of the cloth, etc., the Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures, and Commerce in the Adelphi rewarded Mr. Clegg for his discovery of a substitute in dyeing that color. For this purpose, equal parts of potash or any other strong alkaline salt and vitriol of copper are to be separately dissolved and the 2 solutions gradually mixed. If the vitriol be sufficiently saturated, the water on the surface will become transparent on adding a few drops of the alkaline solution, but if not, it will produce a blue color, so that no potash should be added till a complete saturation be effected. These proportions of vitriol and alkaline salt will be equivalent to a similar quantity of verdigris, and on being combined with decoctions of logwood in the same manner as verdigris, will impart a fine black dye, which is by no means prejudicial to the texture of cloth, hats, or other articles so often rotted by pernicious black dyes. Artificial musk. The mode of making artificial musk, which is often used in Germany for that expensive odorous drug, is simply as follows. Add to 1 dram of oil of amber, by small portions at a time, 4 times the quantity of nitrous acid, commonly called aquafortis, carefully stirring them together with a glass rod all the time, and continuing to do so until the whole be converted into a yellow resin, possessing the smell of musk in great perfection. It must, of course, be kept closely stopped up like real musk, and may sometimes supply the place of that high-priced article, not forgetting the nature of its chief ingredient. Wonderful but easy and effectual method of rendering all sorts of paper fireproof. This astonishing effect is produced by a most simple process. It is only necessary, whether the paper be plain, written, or printed on, or even marbled, stained, on painted for hangings, to immerse it in a strong solution of alum water and then thoroughly dry it, when it will immediately become fireproof. This experiment is readily ascertained by holding a slip of paper thus prepared over a candle. Some paper, however, will require to imbibe more of the solution than it may receive by a single immersion, in which case the operation of dipping and drying must be repeated till such paper becomes fully saturated, when it is positively asserted neither the color nor quality of the paper will be in the smallest degree affected, but that, on the contrary, both will be even improved. Bellamy's patent methods of making leather of all sorts waterproof. The patentee and inventor of these methods, Mr. John Bellamy, makes use of two compositions, which, according to his specification in the Patent Office, registered 1794, are as follow. A gallon each of nut and poppy oils are to be mixed with 3 gallons of linseed oil, or 1 gallon of either nut or poppy oil may be added to 3 of that expressed from linseed, or 2 gallons of linseed oil may be combined with a pint of nut oil and the like quantity of poppy oil. These ingredients, either in the above proportions or such others as may be required by the nature of the oils, being mixed in an iron pot, are to be placed over a gentle fire, and to each gallon of oil must be added a pound of white copperas, sugar of lead, colcathar, or any other drying substance. When the whole has remained 6 or 7 hours over such a degree of heat as it will bear without rising, till it become sufficiently dry, it is to be taken off and suffered to cool. The first compound is then fit for use. The second compound, for the same purpose of rendering all kinds of leather waterproof, is thus directed to be made. Take a pound of gum resin, half a pound of pitch, and 1/4 of a pound each of tar and turpentine. Well mix these ingredients with 1 gallon of the oils prepared according to the first method, by gently heating the entire mass, and then increasing the fire till the whole be thoroughly incorporated. When the oils prepared according to the first method, or the gums according to the second, are sufficiently cool, either is to be rubbed into the leather with a brush dipped in the respective composition, and the thoroughly impregnated leather being stretched on an even board, the superfluous matter is to be removed from its surface. Sole leather and other thick substances are to be first gently warmed, and, after being fully saturated with the composition and properly dried in a warm place, they are ready for use. Genuine receipt for making the invaluable cordial liquor called Vespetro, recommended by the King of France's physicians at Montpellier. This truly excellent and agreeable cordial, which comes thus sanctioned to the world, is recommended for all complaints in the stomach, indigestion, sickness, colic, obstructions, stitches of the side, spasms in the breast, diseases of the kidneys, strangury, gravel, oppression of the spleen, loathing, vertigo, rheumatism, shortness of breath, etc. The following are the genuine instructions for making it. Take a thick glass or stone bottle which will hold considerably more than 2 English quarts, and put in it 2 Paris pints, being equal to about 2 English quarts, of the best brandy, adding the following seeds, first grossly pounded in a mortar, 2 drachms of angelica seeds, 1 ounce of coriander seeds, and a large pinch of pugil each of fennel seeds and anise seeds. Then squeeze in the juice of 2 fresh lemons, putting in also their rinds. Add a pound of loaf sugar, and, while shaking the bottle from time to time, let the whole infuse 5 days. After this, to render the liquor clearer, pass it through a cotton bag or filtering paper, and bottle it up, carefully and closely corked. To be taken, a small cordial glass at a time, more or less frequently, according to the circumstances. A tablespoonful taken 4 or 5 successive mornings is said to kill the worms in children, and on rubbing with that small quantity the nose and temples fasting, it is a preservative of the person so using it against the ill effects of damp or unwholesome air. In short, this liquor will abundantly satisfy all who may have occasion to use it, and a gentleman, having long been afflicted with a hepatic flux, which gave him continual torment, the use of this liquor carried it off and completely cured him. Incomparable method of salting meat, as adopted by the late Empress of Russia. The following method of salting meat is asserted to have been used by the great Empress Catherine in her household establishment with the utmost success. Boil together over a gentle fire 6 pounds of common salt, 2 pounds of powdered loaf sugar, 3 ounces of saltpeter, and 3 gallons of spring water. Carefully skim it while boiling, and when quite cold, pour it over the meat, every part of which must be covered with the brine. In this pickle, it is said, the meat will not only keep for many months, but the hardest and toughest beef will thus be rendered as mellow and tender as the flesh of a young fowl, while either beef, pork, or even mutton will have a fine flavor imparted by it. In warm weather, however, the blood must be expressed from the meat, and the whole well rubbed over with fine salt before it is immersed in the liquor. Young pork should not be left longer than 3 or 4 days in this pickle, as it will then be quite sufficiently softened. But hams, intended for drying, may remain a fortnight before they are hung up, when they should be rubbed with a pollard and closely covered with paper bags to prevent their being fly-blown. Though this pickle is, at first, somewhat more expensive than common brine, as it may be again used on being boiled with additional water and other ingredients, it is far from being, on the whole, importantly more dear, whilst it seems to promise advantages which most people would be happy to purchase at a much higher price. A Lectuary for the Rheumatism by Dr. Brooks. Take conserve of orange peel, 2 ounces, cinnabar of antimony levigated, ½ ounce, gum guaiacum in powder, 1 ounce, winter's bark in powder, 3 drachms, syrup of orange peel sufficient to make an electuary. The dose, 3 drachms, morning and evening. The art of making the best black ink powder. Infuse 1/4 pound of finely powdered nut galls in 3 pints of rain or river water, exposing it, occasionally well stirred, to a moderate degree of warmth for a few days, till the coloring matter seems fully extracted. Then filter the solution into a vessel slightly covered, and place it in the open air for several weeks. When, on removing the moldy skin from the top, which has gradually been formed, it must be carefully collected, have hot water poured over it, undergo another filtration, and then be evaporated to dryness. Thus will be produced a gray crystalline salt called the acid salt of galls, and which is the essential basis of black ink. On triturating a single drachm of the salt with an equal quantity of vitriol of iron and about a pennyweight of the driest gum arabic, a composition will be obtained which affords an excellent black ink merely on being dissolved in warm water. Genuine syrup for coughs, spitting of blood, etc. This excellent remedy for such frequently very alarming symptoms cannot be made too public. He must, says the learned and liberal Dr. Fuller, be a mere stranger in physic who is not acquainted with this most noble syrup, and how mightily it succors those who cough up blood. It is thus made. Take 6 ounces of comfrey roots and 12 handfuls of plantain leaves, cut and beat them well, strain out the juice, and, with an equal weight of sugar, boil it up to a syrup. End of Part 71.
Part 72 of Modern Domestic Cookery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Vickii Lewis Hassan. Modern Domestic Cookery by William Augustus Henderson. The New Family Receipt Book, Section 4. Vast advantages of baking instead of boiling beetroot. The beetroot too forcibly intrudes itself on the improved sagacity of mankind to be entirely neglected as a source of cheap and salubrious food. The late Dr. Letzam, some few years since, took uncommon pains to recommend a variety of one species of this genus, the German Mangold Wurzel, or famine root, under the appellation of the root scarcity, or large white beetroot, as an article worthy of being universally cultivated. The time, however, seems not yet arrived for the full value of even the more attractive red species to be generally known and duly appreciated, so that his philanthropic design may be said to have hitherto failed. In speaking of the beetroot generally, the red beetroot, therefore, is to be considered as alone designated, and we are about to offer a few hints for bringing its modest and humble merits into a little more deserved estimation. The rich saccharine juice of the beetroot is, in a great degree, lost, and the root itself rendered, at once, less nutritious by the adventitious watery weakness which it is made to imbibe, as well as by parting with the native gelatinous syrup, of which it is thus forcibly deprived. It is therefore most strongly recommended to adopt the mode of baking beetroots instead of boiling them for general use, when they will unquestionably be found to afford a very delicious and most wholesome food. This is not offered as an untried novelty. Beetroots are universally baked all over the continent of Europe, and in Italy particularly. They are carried about, warm from the oven, twice a day, like hot loaves, etc. in London. They are there purchased by all ranks of people, and afford to many thousands, with bread and a little salt only, a very satisfactory meal. Remedy for wind in the veins. This state of the veins, though always visible on the slightest inspection, often escapes any notice, though it leads to many disorders. The following remedy may be taken with advantage whenever they appear in a suspicious state. Take equal quantities of powdered licorice, caraway seeds, and sugar candy, to which add a third part of rhubarb, and the like quantity of cream of tartar, both finely pulverized. Of this mixture, take a teaspoonful 3 or 4 times a day, either by itself or in a glass of wine. It should be continued about a week, and being gently laxative, it cools the blood, eases pains, and relieves and prevents many disorders. Best method of making sage cheese. Take the tops of young red sage, and, having pressed the juice from them by beating in a mortar, do the same with the leaves of spinach, and then mix the 2 juices together. After putting the rennet to the milk, pour in some of this juice, regulating the quantity by the degree of color and taste it is intended to give the cheese. As the curd appears, break it gently and in an equal manner, then emptying it into a cheese vat. Let it be a little pressed in order to make it eat mellow. Having stood for about 7 hours, salt and turn it daily for 4 or 5 weeks, when it will be fit for the table. The spinach, besides improving the flavor and correcting the bitterness of the sage, will give it a much more pleasing color than can be obtained from sage alone. Syrup of ginger. An agreeable and moderately aromatic syrup, impregnated with the flavor and medicinal virtues of ginger, is thus prepared. Macerate 1.5 ounces of beaten ginger in a quart of boiling water, closely covered up, for 24 hours. Then, straining off the infusion, make it into a syrup by adding at least 2 parts of fine loaf sugar dissolved and boiled up in a hot water bath. Wonderful power of the Turkish glue, or Armenian cement, with the art of making it. The jewelers in Turkey, who are mostly Armenians, according to Mr. Etten, formerly a consul and author of the Survey of the Turkish Empire, have a singular method of ornamenting watch cases, etc., with diamonds and other precious stones, by simply gluing or cementing them. The stone is set in silver or gold, and the other part of the metal made flat to correspond with the part to which it is to be fixed. It is then warmed gently, and has the glue applied, which is so very strong that the parts cemented never separate. This glue, which will strongly unite bits of glass and even polished steel, and may of course be applied to a vast variety of useful purposes, is thus made. Dissolve 5 or 6 bits of gum mastic, each the size of a large pea, in as much spirits of wine as will suffice to render it liquid, and in another vessel dissolve as much isinglass, previously a little swelled or softened in water, though none of the water must be used, in French brandy or good rum, as will make a 2-ounce vial of very strong glue, adding 2 small bits of gum galbanum or ammoniacum, which must be rubbed or ground till they are dissolved. Then mix the whole with a sufficient heat. Keep the glue in a phial stopped close, and when it is to be used, set the bottle in hot or boiling water. Mr. Etten observes that some persons have, in England, prepared and sold this composition under the name of Armenian cement, but it is much too thin, and the quantity of mastic in it too small. It must, this gentleman adds, be like strong carpenter's glue. This certainly is one of the most valuable known cements in the world, nor is it at all improbable that a plan said to have been invented in France or Germany for making up clothes, etc., by uniting cloth without sewing, and some attempt founded on the use of this very cement. With what ultimate success we must leave time to develop. In the meanwhile, there can be no sort of doubt that much may be effected by ingenious applications of so powerful an agent. Valuable secret in preparing foil for diamonds and other precious stones, as used by the Armenian jewelers. The method of preparing the rich foils in which the Armenian jewelers set precious stones, particularly diamonds, to much advantage, and which, under roses or half brilliants, is most remarkably beautiful, and not subject to tarnish, is generally kept as a great secret, and such foils, Mr. Etten assures us, sells at Constantinople for from half to $0.75 each. The mode of preparing them is extremely simple. An agate is cut and highly polished of the shape desired. A cavity of about its own size is next formed in a block of lead, and over this cavity is placed a bit of tin, the thickness of strong brown paper, scraped very bright. The agate is then placed on the tin over the cavity and struck with a mallet, when the beautiful polish which the tin instantly receives is scarcely to be imagined by those who have never seen it. Easy method of dyeing cotton with madder, as practiced at Smyrna. Cotton at Smyrna, Mr. Etten tells us, is dyed with madder in the following manner. The cotton is boiled in common olive oil, and then in mild alkali. Being thus cleaned, it will take the madder dye, and this is the fine color so greatly admired in Smyrna cotton yarn. I have heard, adds this gentleman, that the sum of £5,000 was given in England for this secret. It is doubtless a secret in preparing cottons, and perhaps other articles, for the reception of a particular dye, very well worth knowing. The Duchess of Marlborough's admirable water for thickening the hair, and to prevent its falling off. This most excellent water for the hair is produced in the following manner. Distill as cool and slowly as possible 2 pounds of honey, a handful of rosemary, and 12 handsful of the curlings or tendrils of grapevines, infused in a gallon of new milk, from which about 2 quarts of the water will be obtained. Celebrated French worm medicine for dogs. This medicine has the reputation of effectually killing and expelling the worms with which dogs are often so grievously tormented, and which probably may be one grand cause of their running mad. It is thus made. Take 4 for 1 dose, which generally proves sufficient. 2 drachms each of juice of wormwood, aloes, and Staves acre, the 2 last powdered as small as possible, with 1 drachm each of pounded burnt hartshorn and sulphur. Mix the whole together in nut oil to the quantity of about half a glass, which must be given to the dog for a dose. If at all necessary, another dose may be given a day or 2 after. Superior use of the celebrated German tender, and great importance of its being universally adopted. On the continent of Europe, Every traveler, sportsman, etc., carries constantly this tinder about him, which is conveniently portable and resembles a piece of soft and very thick tan leather, of elastic substance, and a sort of velvet surface on the upper part. It is, in fact, a large fungus, commonly called punk, which grows at the roots of old trees, where it spreads to a considerable size. This substance is dressed, hammered, and otherwise manufactured for the purpose into this appearance, and, being dried, forms the true German tinder at all times ready for use, and far less liable to become damp than English tinder. The manner of using it is by tearing off a small bit which will serve several times, and holding it at the edge of the flint, which is smote by the steel, instead of the steel by the flint. In this the Germans are so expert, and can so well rely on their tinder, that they will engage to light it at a single stroke, and, indeed, seldom fail to do so. The tinder being thus kindled may be placed in a pipe of tobacco, or extinguished instantly between the finger and thumb, after lighting a match for this or any other purpose. It is always kept in a pouch or box, with the flint, steel, and short German matches, and few persons are much from home without carrying them constantly in their pockets. If the German tinder were to be manufactured in England, many poor persons might be employed in collecting the punk, which is now suffered to rot without utility, and, could it be brought entirely to prevent the destruction of rags for tinder, a quantity far exceeding what may be generally imagined, it might prove the means of greatly assisting the manufacture of paper. To make a powder, by which you may write with water. Bruise to powder a handful of galls, half an ounce of vitriol, an ounce of gum arabic and gum sandric. Mingle them finely sifted together, then rub your paper with a little of it laid upon cotton wool, and, having smoothed it, take water and write upon the paper, then suffering it to dry, it will be black. Turkish method of filtering water by ascension. The process is this. They make 2 wells, from 5 to 10 feet, or any other depth, at a small distance from each other, with a communication between the 2 at their bottoms. The separation is of clay well beaten, or other substances, impenetrable by water. Both wells are then filled with sand and gravel. The opening of the well into which the water to be filtered runs is made somewhat higher than that into which it is to ascend, nor does the sand of this latter approach the brim, where there is either sufficient room left for all the filtered water, or it is drawn off by a spout run into a vessel placed for that purpose. The greater the difference is between the height of the 2 wells, the faster the water filters, but the less it is, the better it operates, provided a sufficient quantity of water be supplied by it for the intended purpose. This, Mr. Eden observes, may be practiced in a cask, tub, jar, or other vessel, and would be useful on board of ships, the water being conveyed to the bottom by a pipe, and the lower end having in it a sponge, or the pipe might be filled with coarse sand. It is evident that all such particles as, by their gravity, are carried down in filtration by descent, will not rise with the water in filtration by ascension. From this account, it should seem that the principle of filtration by ascent, considered as a new discovery by some ingenious Europeans, has been long known to the Turks. Mr. Peacock's patent machine for purifying and filtering the foulest water. The utility of filtering machines in the different processes of brewing, distillery, and dyeing, as well as that of making bread and all other domestic arts, is sufficiently obvious. The filtering machine of Mr. Peacock has been contrived and composed with a combination of skill and simplicity which is seldom witnessed. The turbid fluid is poured into a vessel, with layers of sifted gravel or small pebbles, in different gradations of size, at the bottom, and connected somewhat like the Turkish filtering wells with a similar vessel, with like strata or layers, in progressive degrees of fineness, through which the water, however foul, on its entrance into the first vessel now rises clear and pure in this. Had Mr. Peacock, who was one of the first architects in the world, been a poor or mercenary man, this invention might have obtained him a large fortune, but being neither one nor the other, though this gentleman secured his right by patent, and he was only solicitous of its being adopted from philanthropic motives, and has probably lost more money than he has gained by the invention. When its use becomes duly appreciated, some future manufacturer of Mr. Peacock's filtering machines may probably reap the advantage. A specimen of his machine is deposited in Guildhall, London, and, though capable of yielding a constant and pure stream of 300 gallons in 24 hours, it does not occupy more room than a common large drip or filtering stone, with all its accompanying apparatus, that nothing may be wanting to its perfection. It is easily cleansed, though seldom necessary, in the short space of a single minute. Nothing, therefore, is easier than for brewers, distillers, dyers, etc., who are so inclined to have all their water filtered by means of Mr. Peacock's invention, which is capable of being extended to any magnitude at an expense which cannot be the smallest object to the generality of persons concerned in those respective manufactories. This invention, could it be brought into general use, might be considered as a blessing to the nation. At sea, if the strata may be so fixed as not to be too much disturbed or deranged by the ship's motion, which seems very possible, the use of such a machine must be so great that no vessel ought to sail without one. A little charcoal, from its antiseptic quality, might perhaps be introduced with advantage among the strata of gravel. The want of filtered water gives rise to more nephritic complaints than is imagined. Management of coffee in France. Those who wish to have excellent coffee in France roast it every day as it is used. They even say that it should be roasted, ground, infused, and drunk in the space of 2 hours, and assert that if these processes be longer in succeeding each other, the coffee loses much of that volatile spirit which constitutes all its agreeable flavor. The quantity commonly used is 1 ounce to 5 cups of spring water to produce 4 of good and clear coffee. In the meantime, it is usual to throw their coffee grounds into a vessel, boil them half an hour, and leave them to settle. This infusion so well serves for a third part of the coffee in powder, that in a coffee pot of 14 cups of pure spring water, which should have 3 ounces to be good, 2 ounces with this infusion will be of equal strength and goodness. The operation of boiling the grounds is performed in large coffee houses 5 or 6 times every day. This is the common way of making coffee throughout France, where it is generally drank with sugar and cream, while at different coffee houses, and in particular families, vanilla, isinglass, and other ingredients are also introduced, as they have lately been in England. The French, beside breakfasting often on coffee, usually drink 2 cups about half an hour after dinner to hasten digestion, or abate the fumes of wine and liquors when they have been taken to exceed the bounds of necessity. An invaluable, though cleanly and easily made mixture for effectually destroying those noisome vermin bugs. Mix half a pint of spirits of turpentine and half a pint of best rectified spirits of wine in a strong bottle, and add in small pieces of about half an ounce of camphire, which will dissolve in a few minutes. Shake the mixture well together, and, with a sponge or brush dipped in it, well wet the bed and furniture where the vermin breed. This will infallibly destroy both them and their nets, though they swarm. The dust, however, should be well brushed from the bedstead and furniture to prevent from such carelessness any stain. If that precaution is attended to, there will be no danger of soiling the richest silk or damask. On touching a live bug with only the tip of a pen, put into the mixture the insect will be instantly deprived of existence, and should any bugs happen to appear after using the mixture, it will only be from not wetting the lining, etc., of the bed. The foldings or liddings of the curtains near the rings or the joints or holes in and about the bed or headboard, in which places the vermin nestle and breed, so that those parts being well wetted with more of the mixture, which dries as fast as it is used, and pouring it into the joints and holes where the sponge and brush cannot reach, it will never fail totally to destroy them. The smell of this mixture, though powerful, is extremely wholesome and to many persons very agreeable. It exhales, however, in 2 or 3 days. Only one caution is necessary, but that is important. The mixture must be well shaken when used, but never applied by candlelight, lest the spirits, being attracted by the flare of the candle, might cause a conflagration. Grand Tisane, or diet drink of health and longevity, by a celebrated French physician who lived nearly 120 years. The famous inventor of this admirable prolonger of human existence was Monsieur de Saint Catherine, who, by taking it himself for a fortnight 3 times a year, before winter, toward Easter, and during the greatest heats of summer, lived to the age of nearly 120 years. This tisane is pronounced useful to all sorts of persons. If they are ill, to cure them; if well, to preserve them in health. It is even good for infants, and above all, excellent for old people. An infinitude of facts attest its wonderful effects. It is thus directed to be prepared. Take about a quart of the best sifted and well-washed oats, and a small handful of wild succory roots, newly drawn out of the earth. Boil them gently in 6 quarts of river water for 3/4 of an hour, and then add half an ounce of crystal mineral, and 3 or 4 spoonsful of the best honey, or 1/4 of a pound of it in weight. Let the whole now boil half an hour longer, then strain it through linen, put the liquid in an earthen vessel, and leave it covered to cool. For persons of a bilious habit, only half the quantity of honey should be used, as the sweetness has a tendency to increase the bile. 2 good glasses of this tisane should be drank every morning, fasting, without eating anything for some hours, and the same quantity 3 hours after dinner. This course must be continued for 14 days, without bleeding or confinement, or taking broth, new-laid eggs, or any other particular diet, but in all respects living as usual. The weak and infirm need only take a single glass, and they will not fail to feel the good effect. It is natural that persons who are too gross and costive should commence with some previous purgative, after which this remedy will prove more efficacious. This tisane is easy to take and pleasant in its operations, not occasioning any gripping pains or other disagreeable sensations. At the same time, it perfectly cleanses the veins, is very diuretic, greatly promotes expectoration, purges the brain, cleanses the lungs, the liver, and the spleen, expels putrid and malignant tumors, all pain from the head, gravel, and even stone when newly formed, cures tertian and quartan agues, however inveterate, all colics and pleurisy, the itch, blotches, and other foul eruptions, and, in short, every kind of heaviness, lassitude, and general debility. It rouses the senses, clears the sight, excites appetite, and gives rest and sleep. It refreshes, feeds, and conveys perfect health, and even seems still sensibly operating and doing good for a month or 2 after it has been taken. It is, beside all this, very nourishing. Instead of weakening, as in the case with the greater part of other remedies, it absolutely strengthens, and during the dog days and greatest heats of summer, when medicines in general are subject to become dangerous and even fatal, this is, in fact, more salutary than at any other season. It might, indeed, be taken every day without doing the smallest injury, the party taking care, during intensely cold weather, to keep constantly warm. To attain long life, it will perhaps be sufficient to take it for a fortnight once or twice in the year, if once only, during the great heats, as the best season for its use. This panegyric, however great, is translated almost verbatim from a most respectable French author. It is undoubtedly an excellent medicine. Curious and simple manner of keeping apricots, peaches, nectarines, plums, etc., and even figs, fresh all the year. For this small but excellent article, we are indebted to no less a person than the celebrated Monsieur Lemery, one of the first chemists France ever produced. Beat well up together equal quantities of honey and common water. Pour it into an earthen vessel. Put in the fruits all freshly gathered, and cover them up quite close. When any of the fruit is taken out, wash it in cold water, and it is fit for immediate use. Genuine Windsor soap. To make this famous soap for washing the hands, shaving, etc., nothing more is necessary than to slice the best white soap as thin as possible, melt it in a stew pan over a slow fire, scent it well with oil of caraway, and then pour it into a frame or mold made for that purpose, or a small drawer adapted in size and form to the quantity. When it has stood 3 or 4 days in a dry situation, cut it into square pieces, and it is ready for use. By this simple mode, substituting any more favorite scent for that of caraway, all persons may suit themselves with a good perfumed soap at the most trifling expense. Shaving boxes may be at once filled with the melted soap instead of a mold. Art of dyeing or staining leather gloves to resemble the beautiful York tan, Limerick dye, etc. These different pleasing hues of yellow-brown or tan color are readily imparted to leather gloves by the following simple process. Steep saffron in boiling hot soft water for about 12 hours. Then, having slightly sewed up the tops of the gloves to prevent the dye from staining the insides, wet them over with a sponge or soft brush dipped into the liquid. The quantity of saffron, as well as of water, will of course depend on how much dye may be wanted and their relative proportions or the depth of color required. A common teacup will contain sufficient in quantity for a single pair of gloves. Art of making phosphoric tapers or matches. In a tubular piece of glass 4 inches long and a single line only internal diameter, closed at one end, put a small bit of phosphorus and pushing it to the extremity, introduce a taper covered slightly with wax to fill up the rest of the tube, which must be hermetically sealed. When plunging the other end into boiling water, the phosphorus melts and adheres to the taper or match. A line is usually marked on the glass with a flint at about 1/3 the length of the tube, where it is to be broken when the taper is wanted for use, which being then briskly drawn out, will be found completely lighted by the phosphorus. End of Part 72. Part 73 of Modern Domestic Cookery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Vickii Lewis Hassan. Modern Domestic Cookery by William Augustus Henderson. Part 73. The New Family Receipt Book, Section 5. Easy method of preparing phosphoric bottles. Heat a common glass vial by fixing it in a ladle full of sand, then putting in 2 or 3 minute bits of phosphorus. Stir them about with a piece of red-hot iron wire till the phosphorus is all spread over and adheres to the internal surface of the bottle, where it would form a reddish coating. When, by repeated introductions of the heated wire, this is completely effected, the bottle is to remain open a quarter of an hour and then be corked for use. One end of a common match being put into a bottle thus prepared, on touching the phosphorus and being suddenly drawn out will be with certainty lighted, as there can be no particular danger of accident or fire from the use of these bottles, and with reasonable care in using them and keeping them closely stopped, a single bottle would last a considerable time and might, were the demand general, be replenished at a most trifling expense. It may, possibly, in the hands of some ingenious and enterprising person, be finally made to supersede the tinderbox, that dreadful consumer of rags and consequent enemy to the manufacture of paper. Phosphorus is one of those grand discoveries of modern times, the chief utilities of which seem to be reserved for a future and wiser age. Specifications of Lord William Murray's patent for extracting starch from horse chestnuts. The patent for this useful invention and discovery is dated March 8, 1796. Of course, the exclusive privilege of extracting starch from horse chestnuts in the following manner was confined to the patentee till the expiration of 14 years. We shall present our curious readers with the mode of preparing this starch in his lordship's own words, extracted from the specification in the patent office. I first take the horse chestnuts out of the outward green prickly husk, and then, either by hand, with a knife or other tool, or else with a mill adapted for that purpose, I very carefully pare off the brown rind, being particular not to leave the smallest speck and to entirely eradicate the sprout or growth. I next take the nuts and rasp, grate or grind them fine into water, either by hand or by a mill adapted for that purpose. The pulp, which is thereby formed in that water, I wash as clean as possible through a coarse hair sieve, and then again through a still finer, constantly adding clean water to prevent any starch from adhering to the pulp. The last process is to put it with a large quantity of water, about 4 gallons to a pound of starch, through a fine gauze, muslin, or lawn, so as entirely to clear it of all bran or other impurities. As soon as it settles, I pour off the water and then mix it up with clean, repeating this operation till it no longer imparts any green, yellow, or other color to the water. I then drain it off till nearly dry and set it to bake either in the usual mode of baking starch or else spread out before a brisk fire, being very attentive to stir it frequently to prevent its horning, that is to say, turning to a paste or jelly, which on being dried turns hard like horn. The whole process should be conducted as quick as possible. The utility of this invention requires no comment. Should it come into general use, not only a vast consumption of wheat flour must be saved, but from the necessity of planting more chestnut trees for the sake of a fruit hitherto considered as of no sort of value, much of that excellent and beautiful wood will be produced for the many purposes to which it is applicable. Patent potato composition to be used instead of yeast. For this ingenious contrivance, which introduces potatoes as a sort of leaven for making wheaten bread, a patent was obtained by the inventor, Mr. Richard Tillyer Blount, in the year 1787, which of course is now expired. The following is the process for this purpose, as described by Mr. Blount in his specification. To make a yeast gallon of this composition, such yeast gallon containing 8 beer quarts, boil in common water 8 pounds of potatoes as for eating, bruise them perfectly smooth, and mix with them, while warm, 2 ounces of honey or any other sweet, and 1 beer quart of common yeast. For making bread, mix 3 beer pints of the above composition with a bushel of flour, using warm water in making the bread. The water to be warmer in winter than in summer, and the composition to be used in a few hours after it is made. And as soon as the sponge or the mixture of the composition with the flour begins to fall the first time, the bread should be made and put in the oven. Britannic elastic gum. For the invention of this curious and useful composition, A patent was obtained in the year 1781 by Mr. Albert Angel, who describes it in his specification as being very serviceable and useful in the several branches of portrait and house painting by making the colors durable and free from peeling, as of great utility in gilding, painting, penciling, and staining of silks, calicoes, etc., and in dressing silk, linen, and cotton in the loom instead of gum or paste, so as to strengthen the threads of the finest cottons, as excellent for beautifying and fixing the colors on paper, equal to that done in India, as of the greatest use for rendering the clay or composition used in modeling sufficiently supple and preventing its drying too fast, and, lastly, not less effectual in causing a transparency of colors fit for china and earthenware so as to stand baking or burning. This protecting gum is stated to be prepared in the following very simple manner. Put into an iron kettle and melt down together till the mixture become this composition or elastic gum, a gallon of linseed or nut oil, a pound of yellow or bleached beeswax, 6 pounds of glue or size, a quarter of a pound of verdigris, a quarter of a pound of litharge, and 2 quarts of spring or rainwater. West India bitters, or anti-bilious drops. The following is said to have been Toussaint's late Imperial of Haiti celebrated bitters called by him anti-bilious drops, and used generally throughout the West India Islands. Take 3 drachms of Seville orange peel, 2 drachms of gentian root, 1 drachm each of cardamoms, grains of paradise, and galangalls, half a drachm each of nutmeg and cloves, 1 scruple each of saffron and cochineal, and half a handful each of chamomile flowers and Roman wormwood. Infuse the whole in 2 quarts of brandy, rum, or Madeira wine, and, after it has stood some time, pour off what is clear, and add to the ingredients a quart more of either liquor, though brandy is considered as best for the purpose. This, too, having remained a somewhat longer time, and been occasionally shaken, may be in like manner poured off for use. 2 teaspoonfuls, or somewhat less, are directed to be taken an hour before dinner in half a glass of wine. Oxymel of garlic for asthmatic complaints, rheumatism, etc. In a general sense, oxymels are any compositions of honey and vinegar boiled to the consistence of a syrup. Simple oxymel, for example, is merely clarified honey melted in an equal weight of water, with the addition of as much vinegar as water, boiled to the consistence of a syrup, and even this, taken about half an ounce at a time, is said to attenuate gross tumors, carry away slimy matter, open old stoppages and obstructions of the lungs, and remove phlegm with whatever else occasions shortness of breath. In the human asthma, for promoting expectoration and the fluid secretions, etc., the oxymel of garlic seems to stand in still higher estimation with the faculty. It is thus made. Boil, in a pint of vinegar, half an ounce of cleansed caraway and sweet fennel seeds for about a quarter of an hour. Then take it off the fire, slice in 3 ounces of garlic, and cover it closely up. As soon as it becomes cold, the liquor must be strained and expressed, and mixed by the heat of a water bath with a pound and a quarter of clarified honey to a proper syrupy consistence. A teaspoonful or 2 of this oxymel, taken occasionally, particularly night and morning, will scarcely ever fail of proving beneficial to all persons afflicted with an asthma. It is also frequently serviceable in rheumatic complaints, especially when assisted by warm imprecations. The Honorable Mr. Charles Hamilton's method of making grape wines, fully equal to champagne and old hock, from the fruit of his beautiful vineyard at Paynes Hill in Surrey, England. The vineyard, belonging to Paynes Hill, one of the finest country residences in the United Kingdom, is situated on the south side of a gentle hill, the soil being gravelly sand. It is planted entirely with two sorts of Burgundy grapes, the Auvergnat, which is the most delicate and tender, and the miller's grape, originally so named from the powdered whiteness on the leaves in the spring, called in England the black cluster, or Burgundy grape. We shall give, in the Honorable Mr. Hamilton's own words, his valuable account of the process pursued and its successful effect. The first year I attempted to make wine in the usual way by treading the grapes, then letting them ferment in the vat till all the husk and impurities formed a thick crust at the top. The boiling ceased, and the clear wine was drawn off from the bottom. This essay did not answer. The wine was so very harsh and austere that I despaired of ever making red wine fit to drink. But through that harshness, I perceived a flavor, something like that of a small French white wines, which made me hope I should succeed better with white wine. That experiment succeeded far beyond my most sanguine expectations. For the very first year I made white wine, it nearly resembled the flavor of champagne, and in 2 or 3 years more, as the wine grew stronger, to my great amazement, my wine had a finer flavor than the best champagne I ever tasted. The first running was as clear as spirits. The second running was Oida Perdrix, or partridge eye color, and both sparkled and creamed in the glass like champagne. It would be endless to mention how many good judges of wine were deceived by my wine, and thought it superior to any champagne they had ever drank. Even the Duc de Mirepoix preferred it to any other wine, but such is the prejudice of some people against anything of English growth. I generally found it most prudent not to declare where it grew till after they passed their verdict on it. The surest proof I can give of its excellence is that I have sold it to wine merchants for 50 guineas a hogshead, and one wine merchant, to whom I sold 500 pounds worth at one time, assured me he sold some of the best of it from 7 shillings and 6 to 10 shillings per bottle. After many years' experience, the best method I found of managing it was this. I let the grapes hang till they had got all the maturity the season would give them. Then they were carefully cut off with scissors and brought home to the wine barn in small quantities to prevent their breaking or pressing one another. Then they were all picked off the stalks, and all the mouldering or green ones discarded before they were committed to the press, where they were all pressed in a few hours after they were gathered. Much would run from them before the press squeezed them from their own weight on one another. This running was as clear as water and as sweet as syrup, and all of the first pressing and part of the second continued white. The other pressings grew reddish and were not mixed with the best. As fast as the juice run from the press into a large receiver, it was put into the hogsheads and closely bunged up. In a few hours, one would hear the fermentation begin, which would soon burst the cask if not guarded again by hooping them strongly with iron and securing them in strong wooden frames, and the heads with wedges. In the height of the fermentation, I have frequently seen the wine oozing through the pores of the staves. These hogsheads were left all the depth of winter in the cold barn to have the benefit of the frost. When the fermentation was over, which was easily discovered by the cessation of the noise and oozing, but to be more certain, the pegging, the cask showed when it would be quite clear. Then it was racked off into clean hogsheads and carried to the vaults before any warmth of weather could raise a second fermentation. In March, the hogsheads were examined. If they were not quite fine, they were fined down with common fish glue or isinglass in the usual manner. Those which were fine of themselves were not fined down. All were bottled about the end of March, and in about 6 weeks more would be in perfect order for drinking, and would be in their prime for above 1 year. But the second year the flavor would abate, and would gradually decline till it lost all flavor and sweetness. Some that I kept 16 years became so like old hock that it might pass for such to one who was not a perfect connoisseur. The only art I ever used to it was putting 3 pounds of white sugar candy to some of the hogsheads when the wine was first tuned from the press, in order to conform to a rage that prevailed to drink none but very sweet champagne. In the astonishing success of this process, we see demonstrated how little assistance from art is required by nature, provided that little be judiciously applied. Art of extracting spots of grease, tallow, oil, etc., from valuable books, prints, and papers of all sorts, without the smallest injury to the printing or writing. The frequency of such accidents as spot with grease valuable printed books, prints, ledgers, and other account books, as well as letters and writings of all descriptions, renders the method of restoring them to their pristine purity of appearance an article of no little importance. For this purpose, the following is the exact process. Having in readiness some common blotting paper, gently warm the spotted part of the book or other article damaged by grease, tallow, or oil, and, as it melts, take up as much as possible by repeated applications of fresh bits of the blotting paper. When no more can thus be imbibed, dip a small brush in the essential oil of well-rectified spirit of turpentine, heated almost to a boiling state, and wet with it both sides of the paper, which should also be at the same time a little warm. This operation must be repeated till all the grease be extracted, when another brush, dipped in highly rectified spirit of wine, being passed over the same part, the spot or spots will entirely disappear, and the paper reassume its original whiteness, without detriment of any sort to the paper, or any printed or written characters previously impressed thereon. Blakey's patent substitute for gum, in thickening colors for calico printers, etc. This useful article is thus described by Mr. Francis Blakey of Glasgow, the patentee, in his specification. The gum substitute to thicken colors for linen and calico printing, and making up or furnishing printers' color tubs, and which may also be applied to several other uses, is prepared by boiling any quantity of flaxseed in a sufficient quantity of water, till the whole substance be extracted, and having strained it through a linen or woolen cloth, again boiling down the liquor to the consistence of a jelly. This is to be kept in a closed vessel, and, for preservation, to have a little strong spirits put in, or some sweet oil poured on the top. It might, however, be preserved with bitters. The printer, in using this substitute, may either put a certain quantity into a gallon of color, according to the nature of it, and the particular kind of work to be done, and regulate himself by trial, as is common in using gum, or reduce the substitute by boiling it in water to the consistence that may be found requisite. French method of making garlic vinegar. This, which is one of the favorite French vinegars, is thus simply made. Steep an ounce of garlic in 2 quarts of the best white wine vinegar, with a nutmeg soaked and cut in bits, and about a dozen cloves. Fine tarragon vinegar. The peculiar and agreeable spicy warmth which this slightly bitter herb, the Artemisia dracunculus of the Linnean system, communicates to vinegar, makes it much used for that purpose, as well as in salads, soups, etc., throughout Europe. In Spain and the south of France, it grows naturally to great perfection, and it flourishes in the soil of our English gardens, where it flowers in July and produces ripe seeds in autumn. The best way of making tarragon vinegar is by putting a quantity of the fresh leaves loosely into a jar and then filling it up with vinegar to the height first occupied by the leaves. If, for example, the jar must be thus apparently filled, there will be still room enough for the proper quantity of vinegar. After it has thus remained 2 or 3 weeks, chiefly in the sun or other warm situation, it may be strained off and passed through a cotton or flannel jelly bag, and, if not sufficiently fine for putting up in bottles, is to be cleared in the usual way, either by means of isinglass or a little alum water. It is commonly kept in large bottles, which should be well corked and placed in a dry situation. As tarragon is strongly recommended to be eaten with lettuce, this vinegar may in some measure supply the place of the herb as a corrector of coldness. It is also advisable to be used with cucumbers, etc. The famous Evelyn says that tarragon is not only highly cordial, but friendly to the head, heart, and liver, and a great corrector of the weakness of the ventricle. Vinegar of roses. This fine and beautiful vinegar is made by pouring the best white wine vinegar into a jar or bottle loosely filled with rose leaves and letting it remain and be treated exactly after the same manner as the tarragon, putting, however, into each bottle a lump of refined sugar. Precisely in this way are also to be made vinegars of gillyflowers, elderflowers, etc. Cheap and excellent blue color for ceilings, etc. Boil slowly for 3 hours, a pound of blue vitriol and half a pound of the best whiting in about 3 quarts of water. Stir it frequently while boiling, and also on taking it off the fire. When it has stood till quite cold, pour off the blue liquor, then mix the cake of color with good size, and use it with a plasterer's brush in the same manner as whitewash, either for walls or ceilings. Composition for cleaning marble hearths, chimney pieces, alabaster, etc. Mix finely pulverized pumice stone with verjuice, somewhat more than sufficient to cover it, and, after it has stood an hour or more, dip a sponge in the composition, rub it well over the marble or alabaster, which requires cleaning. Wash it off with warm water and dry it with clean linen or cotton cloths. Art of manufacturing the fine red and yellow Morocco leather, as practiced in creme tartary. The celebrated tour of Mrs. Guthrie in Taurida, or the Crimea, commonly called creme tartary, which was made by that lady in 1795 and 1796, furnishes the particulars of this interesting article. In the city of Karazubazar, Mrs. Guthrie informs us, there is an ancient manufactory of Morocco leather, where great quantity are prepared with the skins of the numerous flocks of Tauric goats. The process is thus described. After steeping the raw hides in cold water for 24 hours to free them from the blood and other impurities, the fleshy parts are scraped off with proper instruments. When they are macerated for 10 days in cold lime water to loosen the hair, which is likewise scraped off as clean as possible, being then soaked in cold common water for 15 days, they are trod or worked underfoot in a succession of fresh waters, till, at length, and a mixture of dog's dung being added, they receive a second scraping and are drained of their humidity. They next proceed to what they denominate feeding the skins, by steeping them 4 days in a cold infusion of wheat bran, and then in a decoction of 28 pounds of honey to 5 pails of water, cooled to the temperature of milk from the cow. After remaining thus steeped the same period, they are put into a vessel with holes at the bottom, and pressed till all the liquid has escaped. Lastly, they are steeped for another 4 days in a slight solution of salt and water, 1 pound only to 5 pails, when the leather is quite ready for the reception of the dye. A strong decoction of Artemisia annua, or southern wood, in the proportion of 4 pounds to 10 pails of water, seems to be the basis of all the different colors which they give to the Morocco in the Taurida Astrakhan and the other cities, formerly belonging to the Turkish Empire, where the secret has till now remained. When a red color is required, 1 pound of powdered cochineal is gradually stirred into 10 pails of the fine yellow decoction of Artemisia, with 5 or 6 drachms of alum spread on the leather in a proper vessel. They are next worked underfoot in an infusion of oak leaves and warm water till they become supple and soft. When they are finished, by being rinsed in cold water, rubbed over with olive oil, and calendared with wooden rollers. Yellow Morocco leather is dyed with a stronger decoction of Artemisia 20 pounds to 15 pails of water, nothing being added but 2 pounds of powdered alum, which is gradually introduced by half a tablespoonful at a time. Each skin is twice stained, previously to the final operations of oiling and calendaring. It is also necessary to remark that the skins are prepared in a somewhat different mode for the yellow Morocco leather than for the red. Neither honey nor salt is used, but instead of the decoction of honey, immediately after the skins are taken out of the wheat bran infusion, they are steeped 2 days in an infusion of oak leaves, after which they are next rinsed in cold water and thus made ready for staining yellow. Mrs. Guthrie candidly acknowledges that the above is all the certain information which she has been able to obtain on this curious subject, as she could by no means depend on the vague reports which she had heard relative to the coloring matter added for staining the green and blue kinds. It may, however, be presumed that the light which this lady has thrown on the process of dyeing Morocco leather in general will sufficiently guide our manufacturers to a judicious search after those particular but inferior objects which yet remain undiscovered. Turkish rouge, or secret of the seraglio for making an admirable carmine. Infuse for 3 or 4 days in a bottle of the finest white wine vinegar, half a pound of Fernamberg Brazil wood of a golden red color, well pounded in a mortar. Boil them together half an hour, strain them through linen, and place the liquid again over the fire. In the meantime, having dissolved 1/4 pound of alum in a pint of white wine vinegar, mix the 2 liquids and stir them well, together with a spatula. The scum which now arises, on being carefully taken off and gradually dried, will prove a most beautiful, delicate, and perfectly inoffensive rouge or carmine. Purified syrup of molasses. In many parts of the continent of Europe, a method has for some years been successfully practiced on a large scale of divesting molasses, vulgarly called treacle, of its peculiar mawkish and unpleasant taste, so as to render it, for many purposes, little less useful and pleasant than sugar. Indeed, unless it be for cordials mixed with spices, or in domestic dishes where milk is an ingredient, it may very generally be substituted for sugar. The process for thus preparing it is sufficiently simple and by no means expensive. Boil 12 pounds of molasses with 3 pounds of coarsely pounded charcoal in 6 quarts of water over a slow fire. After the mixture has been stirred together and simmered for at least half an hour, decant it into a deep vessel, and, when the charcoal has subsided, pour off the liquid and again place it over the fire, that the superfluous water may evaporate, and restore the syrup to about its original consistence. Thus, refined, it will produce 12 pounds of a mild and good syrup, proper for use in many articles of food, etc. End of Part 73.
Part 74 of Modern Domestic Cookery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Modern Domestic Cookery by William Augustus Henderson. The New Family Receipt Book, Section 6. Art of Preparing a Fine Red Lake from Dutch Madder. The use of madder in dyeing a fine red color, and also as a first tint for several other shades, has long rendered it famous among dyers, and, by the following process, it will afford a permanent lake of a fine red, applicable to every purpose of painting. Dissolve 2 ounces of the purest alum in 3 quarts of distilled water previously boiled in a clean glazed vessel, and again set over the fire. Withdraw the solution as soon as it begins to simmer, and add to it 2 ounces of the best Dutch madder. Then, boiling it up once or twice, remove it from the fire and filter it through clean white paper. Let the liquor thus filtered stand all night to subside, and, next day, pour the clear fluid into the glazed vessel, heated over the fire, and gradually add a strained solution of salt of tartar, till the matter be wholly precipitated. The mixture must now be again filtered, and boiling distilled water be poured on the red powder till the fluid no longer obtains a saline taste. Nothing more is now necessary but to dry the lake, which will be of a deep red color. If 2 parts of madder be used to 1 of alum, the shade will be still deeper, and if 1 part of the latter article be added to 4 parts of the former, a beautiful rose color will be produced. Clarified goose grease. Goose grease is a valuable but neglected article in most families, and, when properly clarified, forms a most delicate basis for many culinary purposes. This is easily effected by the following simple process. On drawing a goose, separate all the internal fat and put it by in a basin. When the goose is roasted, carefully preserve the drippings separated from the gravy, etc., which is most effectually done on its getting quite cold. The sooner this is put in a saucepan with the raw fat, accompanied by a small onion having 3 cloves stuck into it, the better. Being gently simmered, press it with a wooden spoon till the whole be melted. Then, having well scummed it, pass it through a sieve into a jar capable of containing whatever quantity is likely to be thus added during the season. A moderate use of this article will render many dishes inconceivably savory, particularly rice, thick soups, force meats, etc. It should be served out with a wooden spoon, and if kept in a cool place, properly covered, will continue sweet and good the year round. Composition for restoring scorched linen. The following composition will be found completely to restore linen which has been scorched in ironing, or by hanging too near the fire, etc., accidents that too frequently occur, and hitherto without any effectual remedy. Boil to a good consistency in half a pint of vinegar 2 ounces of fuller's earth, an ounce of hen's dung, half an ounce of cake soap, and the juice of 2 onions. Spread this composition over the whole of the damaged part, and if the scorching were not quite through, and the threads actually consumed, after suffering it to dry on, and letting it receive a subsequent good washing or 2, the place will appear full as white and perfect as any other part of the linen. Easy French method to prevent bacon from becoming rusty. When the bacon has been salted about a fortnight, put it in a box the size of the flitches or pieces to be preserved, on a good bedding of hay, and wrap each piece round entirely with hay, placing also a layer between every 2 flitches or pieces. The box must, of course, be closed to keep out rats, etc. In this state it will continue as good as at first, and without the possibility of getting rusty, for much longer than a year, as has frequently been experienced. It must, however, be kept in a place free from damp. Best Saxon Blue. Mix an ounce of the best powdered indigo with 4 ounces of oil of vitriol in a glass body, and digest it for an hour with the heat of boiling water, frequently shaking the mixture. Then add 3/4 of a pint of water. Stir the whole well together, and, when cold, filter it. This produces a very rich deep blue color. If wanted paler, more water must be added. The heat of boiling water, which is sufficient for this operation, can never spoil the color. By vigorously digesting the indigo in a large quantity of spirit of wine, drying it, and then using it as above, a still finer blue may be produced. But this is not often judged necessary except for very fine paintings. The Reverend Mr. Cartwright's account of the wonderful efficacy of yeast in the cure of putrid diseases. The following account of the Reverend Mr. Cartwright's first discovery and subsequent experience of the good effects of administering yeast in putrid sore throats, fevers, etc., cannot be too generally made known. Several years ago, says this gentleman, for we shall transcribe verbatim his own highly interesting narrative, I went to reside at Brampton, a very populous village near Chesterfield. I had not been there many months before a putrid fever broke out among us, and finding by far the greater number of my new parishioners much too poor to afford themselves medical assistance, I undertook, by the help of such books on the subject of medicine as were in my possession, to prescribe for them. I early attended a boy about 14 years of age who was attacked by this fever. He had not been ill many days before the symptoms were unequivocally putrid. I then administered bark, wine, and such other remedies as my books directed. My exertions, however, were of no avail. His disorder grew every day more untractable and malignant, so that I was in hourly expectation of his dissolution. Being under the absolute necessity of taking a journey, before I set off I went to see him, as I thought, for the last time, and I prepared his parents for the event of his death, which I considered as inevitable, reconciling them in the best manner I was able to a loss which I knew they would feel severely. While I was in conversation on this distressing subject with his mother, I observed, in a corner of the room, a small tub of wort working. The sight brought to my recollection an experiment I had somewhere met with, of a piece of putrid meat being made sweet by suspending it over a tub of wort in the act of fermentation. The idea instantly flashed into my mind that the yeast might correct the putrid nature of this disease, and I instantly gave him 2 large spoonsful, telling the mother, if she found her son better, to repeat this dose every 3 hours. I then set out on my journey. On my return, after a few days, I anxiously inquired about the boy, and was informed he had recovered. I could not repress my curiosity. Though I was greatly fatigued with my journey, and night was coming on, I went directly to where he lived, which was 3 miles off in a wild part of the moors. The boy himself opened the door, looked surprisingly well, and told me that he felt better from the instant he took the yeast. After I left Brampton, I lived in Leicestershire, and, my parishioners being there few and opulent, I dropped entirely my medical character, and would not even prescribe for any of my own family. One of my domestics falling ill, accordingly the apothecary was sent for. The servant's complaint was violent fever, which in its progress became putrid. Having great reliance, and deservedly, on the apothecary's penetration and judgment, the man was left solely to his management. His disorder, however, kept daily gaining ground, till at length the apothecary considered him in very great danger. At last, finding every effort to be of service to him baffled, he told me he considered it a lost case, for in his opinion the man could not survive 24 hours. On the apothecary thus giving him up, I determined to try the effects of yeast, and gave him 2 large teaspoonsful. In 15 minutes from taking it, his pulse, though still feeble, began to get composed and full, and in 32 minutes from taking the yeast, he was able to get up from his bed and walk in his room. At the expiration of the 2nd hour, I gave him a basin of sago, with a good deal of lemon wine and ginger in it, and he ate it with appetite. In another hour I repeated the yeast. An hour afterward I gave him the bark, and the next hour he had food. He had next another dose of yeast, and then went to bed, being 9 o'clock. I went to him next morning at 6 o'clock, when he told me he had had a good night and was recovered. I, however, repeated his medicine, and he was able to go about his business as usual. A year after this, as I was riding past a detached farmhouse on the outskirts of the village, I observed the farmer's daughter standing at the door, apparently in great affliction. On inquiring into the cause of her distress, She told me her father was dying. I dismounted and went into the house to see him. I found him in the last stage of a putrid fever. His tongue was black, his pulse was scarcely perceptible, and he lay stretched out like a corpse in a state of drowsy insensibility. I immediately procured some yeast, which I diluted with water and poured down his throat. I then left him with little hope of his recovery. I returned to him in about 2 hours, and found him sensible and able to converse. I then gave him a dose of bark. He afterward took, at a proper interval, some refreshment. I continued with him till he repeated the yeast, and then left him with directions how to proceed. I called on him the next morning at 9 o'clock, and found him apparently well, walking in his garden. He was an old man, upwards of 70. I have, since, administered the yeast to above 50 persons laboring under putrid fevers, and, what is singular, I have not lost one patient." Dr. Thornton, whose opportunities have been great, as superintending physician of the great general dispensary, including the poor of 9 parishes in London, has made frequent trials of yeast. In St. Giles's particularly, among the numerous poor of that crowded district, he administers, in putrid diseases, after cleansing the first passages, nothing else but 2 tablespoonsful of yeast in some porter every 2 hours, and in about 50 successive cases, not a single patient died under this treatment. The following cases are selected from this physician's successful practice as peculiarly interesting. As Dr. Thornton was accidentally passing the shop of Mr. Burford, in Tottenham Court Road, he heard the shrieks of a mother agonized at seeing her child apparently expire. These alarming screams renewed the struggles of the child, and the nurse was, at this moment, threatening to take away the child that it might die in peace. The doctor immediately got down some tartar emetic, which quickly acted on the stomach, and, that operation ended, gave a dose of rhubarb to clear also the intestines. He then ordered the child yeast and water every 2 hours, with wine and bark, and in 3 days the dying child was up and well. The infection had spread to 2 other persons in the same house. With this and another child, the putrid fever was attended by swelled glands, which had suppurated and threatened mortification. With a robust servant girl, it took the form of a putrid sore throat. This girl also had an emetic, and afterward rhubarb, followed by yeast and water every 2 hours. The first effect of the yeast was that of rendering the pulse fuller and diminishing it 15 beats a minute. The blackness of her tongue soon began to assume a clean and a red appearance, and without either bark or wine, she was speedily restored to health. In Husband Street, a very confined situation near Berwick Street, a malignant fever prevailed, which within a fortnight had swept away 6 persons from 3 houses only, when Dr. Thornton was called in to the assistance of a mother who lay in the same bed with her 2 children. She was delirious, and violently rejected both food and medicine, with which she was, consequently, obliged to be drenched. After an emetic and cathartic had been got down each, herself and children were all put on the same plan. That is, each was made to swallow every 3 hours 2/3 of a glass of fresh porter with 2 tablespoonsful of yeast, and the juice of half a lemon. The food given at intervals was the white of eggs, beat up with some sugar and water, the doctor judging that, as the white of eggs, even under the heat of a hen's body during incubation, does not corrupt, but actually serves as milk to the embryo in the shell, this was of all things least liable to putrefy. Strawberries, being in season, were also ordered, and, with this management alone, she and her little family all rapidly recovered. More testimonies might easily be added, and from several other respectable practitioners, but farther proofs seem unnecessary to establish the prodigious efficacy of yeast in one of the most fatal class of maladies with which the human nature is peculiarly subject to be afflicted. Where indeed is the family which has not suffered the dreadful ravages of some putrid disease, which, under Providence, a knowledge of this simple but potent remedy, and for which we are indebted to the Reverend Mr. Cartwright, might happily have prevented? Admirable cement or mortar as made in the Cotswold Hills. On the Cotswold Hills in Gloucestershire, where lime is dear, and sand not to be had, an excellent mortar is prepared at a moderate price. Invention is seldom more successful than when it is prompted by necessity. The scrapings of the public roads over these hills, being levigated limestone, more or less impregnated with the dung and urine of the animals travelling on them, are found to be a most admirable basis for cement. The scrapings are often used for ordinary walls, and the general proportion, for even the best buildings, is not more than 1 part lime to 3 of scrapings. This mortar, of less than 10 years' standing, has been observed to possess a stone-like tenacity, much firmer than the common stone of the country, and consequently much harder than the stones from which either the basis or the lime was made. The method of preparing this powerful mortar or cement is simply by collecting the road scrapings, slacking the lime, and mixing them very thoroughly together, carefully picking out, as the mass is worked over, the stones or other foulnesses which may have been collected. For stonework this is quite sufficient. For brickwork it might be necessary to pass the materials through a screen or sieve previously to their being united and made up into mortar. Similar scrapings may be collected wherever limestone is used as a material in making or repairing roads. This admirable mortar can, therefore, readily be prepared in all such places with very little trouble or expense. Ancient British liquor called braggot. This once famous old British liquor is still made by a few respectable families, chiefly in Wales, from one of which we have been favoured with an admirable method of preparing it. The original Welsh name is bragod, from which has been formed that of braggot or bragot, for it is found both ways in the few old dictionaries and other books where it occurs, and simply defined as a drink consisting of honey and spices. Were this correct, it could only be considered as the Welsh appellation of mead or metheglin. But, according to our information, braggot implies a combination of malt liquor with honey and spices, the best method of preparing which is as follows. Take after the rate of a gallon of water to a pound of honey, and stir it till the honey be melted. Then, adding half a handful each of rosemary tops, bay leaves, sweetbriar, angelica, balm, thyme, or other sweet herbs, with half an ounce of sliced ginger and a little nutmeg, mace, cinnamon, and a few cloves, boil them gently together for nearly half an hour, scumming it well till it looks tolerably clear. In the meantime, having prepared 3 gallons of the first runnings of strong ale or sweet wort, mix the 2 liquids quite hot with all the herbs and spices, and, stirring them together for some time over a fire, but without suffering them to boil, strain off the liquor and set it to cool. When it becomes only the warmth of new milk, ferment it with good ale yeast, and after it has properly worked, turn it up and hang a bag of bruised spices in the barrel, where it is to remain all the time of drawing. It is generally drank from the cask, but may be bottled, like other liquors, any time after it has entirely ceased to hiss in the barrel. A weaker sort of braggot is sometimes prepared with the 3rd runnings of the ale, a smaller portion of honey, and the strained spices, etc., with a few fresh herbs, the 2nd runnings in that case being made the family ale. These arrangements, however, and other obvious deviations, are made according to the taste or inclination of the respective parties. Wonderful effect of potato liquid in cleaning silk, woolen, and cotton furniture or apparel, etc., without injury to the texture or color. For the communication of this valuable discovery to the Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures, and Commerce, in the Adelphi, February 4, 1805, Mrs. Morris obtained a premium of 15 guineas from that truly honorable institution, in whose transactions of that year it is thus regularly described: Take raw potatoes, in the state they are taken out of the earth, wash them well, then rub them on a grater over a vessel of clean water to a fine pulp. Pass the liquid matter through a coarse sieve into another tub of clear water. Let the mixture stand till the fine white particles of the potatoes are precipitated. Then pour the mucilaginous liquor from the fecula, and preserve this liquor for use. The article to be cleaned should be laid, on a linen cloth, on a table, and having provided a clean sponge, dip the sponge in the potato liquor, and apply the sponge thus wet on the article to be cleaned, and rub it well on with repeated portions of the potato liquor till the dirt is perfectly separated. Then wash the article in clean water several times to remove the loose dirt. It may afterward be smoothed or dried. 2 middle-sized potatoes will be sufficient for a pint of water. The white fecula, which separates in making the mucilaginous liquor, will answer the purpose of tapioca. It will make a useful and nourishing food with soup or milk, or serve to make starch and hair powder. The coarse pulp, which does not pass the sieve, is of great use in cleaning worsted curtains, tapestry, carpets, or other coarse goods. The mucilaginous liquor of the potatoes will clean all sorts of silk, cotton, or woolen goods, without damaging the texture of the article or spoiling the color. It is also useful in cleaning oil paintings or furniture that is soiled. Dirty painted wainscots may be cleaned by wetting a sponge in the liquor, then dipping it in a little fine clean sand, and afterward rubbing the wainscot therewith. Various experiments were made by Mrs. Morris, in the presence of a committee, at the Society's house, and the whole process, on fine and coarse goods of different fabrics, was performed to their entire satisfaction. This simple but very valuable discovery may certainly be applied to many other useful purposes, as well as those which are here particularly enumerated. New method of cleaning feathers from their animal oil. The process for effecting this useful purpose is thus described in the Transactions of the Adelphi Society, who rewarded Mrs. Richardson with a premium of 20 guineas for making the discovery. Take for every gallon of clear water a pound of quick lime. Mix them well together, and, when the undissolved lime is precipitated in fine powder, pour off the clear lime water for use, at the time it is wanted. Put the feathers to be cleaned in another tub, and add to them a sufficient quantity of the clear lime water to cover the feathers about 3 inches, when well immersed and stirred therein. The feathers, when thoroughly moistened, will sink down, and should remain in the lime water 3 or 4 days, after which the foul liquor should be separated from the feathers by laying them on a sieve. The feathers should be afterward well washed in clean water and dried on nets, the meshes being about the same firmness as those of cabbage nets. The feathers must, from time to time, be shaken on the nets, and as they dry they will fall through the meshes and are to be collected for use. The admission of air will be serviceable in the drying, and the whole process may be completed in about 3 weeks. The feathers, after being thus prepared, will want nothing more than beating for use, either as beds, bolsters, pillows, or cushions. So effectual is this method, and so preferable to the old and common way of stoving or baking, that an eminent dealer having sent to the Society some bags of foreign feathers, which retained their unpleasant smell after having been stoved the usual period of 3 days, Mrs. Richardson rendered them perfectly sweet and clean. This is a very important discovery, more particularly as the feathers, by not being hardened with heat, certainly require less beating. Mr. Sebastian Grandy's restoration or discovery of the old Venetian art of preparing grounds for painting on panels, copper or canvas, etc. This ingenious gentleman, having long had the honor of being employed by the most eminent professors of the fine arts in Italy and England, and assisted and improved the processes of preparing canvases and the panels, seems to have discovered, as far as experience can prove, the manner of preparing either canvas, copper, or panel in the old Venetian style, an art which has been long lost, and to which it is well known that Titian, Paul Veronese, Bassani, and other Venetian masters owed much of the peculiar harmony, brightness, and durability of their beautiful productions. Mr. Grandy, having communicated, for the public benefit, his entire process of thus preparing panels, canvas, etc. for artists, and also made other valuable communications with regard to the preparation of oils, colors, crayons, etc. for painting and drawing, was rewarded by the Honorable Society in the Adelphi for the encouragement of arts, etc., with their elegant and honorary silver medal, as well as a pecuniary premium of 20 guineas. These, therefore, in perfect concert with the design of that liberal and truly patriotic institution, we shall contribute in all our power to make more generally known. Mr. Grandy's method of preparing panels and canvases for painters is thus described. Break grossly the bones of sheep's trotters, and boil them in water till they are cleared from their grease, then putting them into a crucible, calcine them, and afterward grind them to powder. Dry some wheaten flour in a pan, over a slow fire, then make it into a thin paste, adding an equal quantity of the pulverized bone ashes, and grind the whole mass well together. This mixture forms the ground for the panel. When the panel has been well pumiced, some of the mixture or ground is to be well rubbed on a pumice stone, that it may be incorporated with the panel. Another coat of the composition is next applied, with a brush on the panel, where it is suffered to dry, the surface being afterward rubbed over with sandpaper. A thin coat of the composition is then applied with a brush, and, if a colored ground be required, a coat or two more must be added, so as to complete the absorbent ground. When a panel thus prepared is wanted to be painted on, it must be rubbed over with a coat of raw linseed or poppy oil, as drying oil would destroy the absorbent quality of the ground, and the painter's colors should also be mixed up with the purified oil for painting hereafter mentioned. Canvas grounds are prepared by giving them a thin coat of the composition and afterward drying and pumicing them, then giving them a second coat, and lastly a coat of coloring matter along with the composition. The grounds thus prepared do not crack. They may be painted in a very short time after being laid, and, from their absorbent quality, allow the business to be proceeded in with greater facility and greater effect than with those prepared in the usual mode. These valuable qualities have been sufficiently ascertained, and are liberally avowed, by Sir William Beechey and other Royal Academicians, whose names are added to Mr. Grandy's last communication. Method of purifying the oil for mixing up colors. Make some of the bone ashes into paste with a little water, so as to form a mass or ball. Put this ball into the fire and make it red hot, then immerse it for an hour in a quantity of raw linseed oil sufficient to cover it. When cold, pour the oil into bottles, add to it a little of the bone ashes, let it stand to settle, and in a single day it will be clear and fit for use. End of Part 74.
Part 75. A Modern Domestic Cookery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Penny Carrington. Modern Domestic Cookery by William Augustus Henderson. The New Family Receipt Book, Section 7. Preparation of white, brown, yellow, red, gray, and blue-black colors which never change and may be used either in oil or water. White is made by calcining the bones of sheep's trotters in a clear open fire till they become a perfect white, which will never change. Brown is made from bones in a similar manner, only calcining from them in a crucible instead of an open fire. Yellow or masticot, by burning a piece of soft brick of a yellowish color in the fire, grinding 1/4 pound of flake white with every pound of brick, calcining them as well as grinding them together, and afterward washing the mixture to separate the sand and letting the finer part gradually dry for use. Red, equal in beauty to Indian red, by calcining some of the pyrites usually found in coal pits. Gray, by calcining together blue slate and bone ashes powdered, grinding them together, washing the texture, and gradually drying it. Blue-black, by burning vine stalks within a close crucible and in a slow fire till they become a perfect charcoal, which must be well ground for use. Superior crayons of permanent colors to be applied either in water or oil. These crayons, produced also by Mr. Grandy, are of a quality superior to any heretofore in use. They are fixed, so as to prevent their rubbing off the paper when used, and may be applied in water or oil. This process of preparing the crayons is thus described. They are made of bone ash powder mixed with spermaceti, adding the coloring matters. The proper proportion is 3 ounces of spermaceti to 1 pound of the powder. The spermaceti to be first dissolved in a pint of boiling water, then the white bone ashes added, and the whole to be well ground together, with as much of the respective coloring matter as may be necessary for the shade of color wanted. They are then to be rolled up in the proper form and gradually dried on a board. Preparation of white and colored chalks. If white chalk be required to work soft, add 1/4 pound of whiting to 1 pound of the bone ash powder. Otherwise, the bone ashes will answer alone. Colored chalks are prepared by grinding the respective coloring matters with bone ashes. These several communications relative to the preparation of grounds, oil, colors, crayons, and chalks for painters were most respectably certified to the Society in the Adelphi by Sir William Beechey and the following other Royal Academicians, etc. Benjamin West, John Opie, Martin Archer Shee, James Northcote, Thomas Lawrence, Joseph Farrington, Richard Cosway, P. J. de Lutherberg, Richard M. Paye, and Isaac Pocock, Esquires, who all confirm the good qualities of the panels prepared by Mr. Grandy, and generally recommend his colors as useful and permanent. The materials are certainly extremely cheap, as well as easy to be procured, and none of the processes for preparations are at all difficult. Syrup of damask roses. The Edinburgh Dispensatory describes syrup of damask roses as an agreeable and mild purgative for children in doses of from half to a whole tablespoonful. It likewise mentions that this syrup proves gently laxative to adults, and with that intention may be of service to costive habits. The method of preparing it, according to the London practice, is as follows. Take 7 ounces of the dried petals of the damask rose, 6 pounds of double refined sugar, and 4 pints of boiling distilled water. Macerate the roses in the water for 12 hours and then strain. Evaporate the strained liquor to 2 pints and a half and add the sugar, that it be made a syrup. In the Edinburgh practice, it is prepared thus. Take 1 pound of the fresh petals of the damask rose, 4 pounds of boiling water, and 3 pounds of double refined sugar. Macerate the roses in the water for 12 hours. Then, to the strained infusion, add the sugar and boil them to a syrup in the usual manner, as directed for syrup of clove, gillyflowers, etc. Syrup of red roses. This, in the Edinburgh dispensatory, is properly distinguished from the syrup of damask roses, being considered as mildly astringent instead of gently laxative. It seems, however, principally valued on account of its beautiful red color. The manner of preparing it is almost the same as the London method of making the syrup of damask roses, called simply syrup of roses. Take 7 ounces of the dried petals of red roses, 6 pounds of double refined sugar, and 5 pounds of boiling water. Macerate the roses in the water for 12 hours, then boil a little and strain the liquor. Add to it the sugar and boil again for a little, so as to form a syrup. There is, it must be confessed, a marked distinction between the London and Edinburgh methods of preparing syrup of roses, much in favor of the latter's superior discrimination. Particularly as the damask rose, besides differing essentially in its medicinal effect, has its odor almost destroyed by drying, while the red rose leaves or petals, on the contrary, are well known to gain increased fragrance when carefully dried. Excellent spruce beer. The salubrity of spruce beer is universally acknowledged, and notwithstanding its invincible terebinthine flavor, forms so refreshing and lively a summer drink that it begins to be greatly used. It is, in fact, a powerful antiscorbutic, and as it is by no means offends the weakest stomach, whatever may be its effect on the palate, it is highly entitled to our attention. In situations where the green shoots and tops, etc., are easily obtained, it may be brewed immediately from them, instead of from the extract, which, however, is by no means to be commonly effected in England, where these trees are not remarkably numerous and are always private property. The regular method of brewing spruce beer, as it is at present in the best manner prepared, and so highly admired for its excessive briskness, is as follows. Pour 8 gallons of cold water into a barrel, and then, boiling 8 gallons more, put that in also. To this add 12 pounds of molasses, with about half a pound of the essence of spruce, and, on its getting a little cooler, half a pint of good ale yeast, the whole being well stirred or rolled in the barrel, and must be left with the bung out for 2 or 3 days, after which the liquor may be immediately bottled, well corked up, and packed in sawdust or sand, when it will be ripe and fit for drink in a fortnight. If spruce beer be made immediately from the branches or cones, they are required to be boiled for 2 hours, after which the liquor is to be strained into a barrel. The molasses and yeast are to be added to the extract, and to be in all respects treated after the same manner. Spruce beer is best bottled in stone, and from its volatile nature, the whole should be immediately drank when the bottle is once opened. Lachmann's celebrated oil color cakes for artists. The following is the process as described in the Transactions of the Society of Arts. Take 4 ounces of the clearest gum mastic and a pint of spirits of turpentine. Mix them together in a bottle, stirring them frequently till the mastic be dissolved. Where haste is required, some heat may be applied, but the solution is better when made cold. Let the colors be the best which can be procured, taking care that, by washing, etc., they are brought to the greatest possible degree of fineness. When the colors are dry, grind them on a hard, close stone, for which purpose porphyry is best, in spirits of turpentine, adding a small quantity of the mastic varnish. Let the colors so ground become again dry, then prepare in the following manner the composition for forming them into cakes. Procure some of the purest and whitest spermaceti, melted in a clean earthen vessel over a gentle fire, and, when fluid, adding 1/3 its weight of pure poppy oil. Stir the whole well together. These things being in readiness, place over a frame or support the stone on which the colors were ground, with a charcoal fire to warm it beneath. This done, grind the color fine with a muller on the warm stone, after which, adding a sufficient quantity of the mixture of poppy oil and spermaceti, work the whole together with the muller to the proper consistence. Lastly, taking a piece of the fit size for the cake intended to be made, roll it into a ball, put it into a mold and press it, when the process will be complete. These cakes, on being wanted for use, must be rubbed down in poppy or other oil, or in a mixture of spirits of turpentine and oil, as may best suit the convenience or intention of the artist. A curious and useful glue. Take an ounce of isinglass, beat it to shreds, and put it into a pint of brandy. When gradually dissolved, which it soon is with a gentle heat, strain the solution through a piece of fine muslin, and the glue will be obtained, which is to be kept in a glass closely stopped. On being dissolved in a moderate heat, it is thin, transparent, and almost limpid. When used in the manner of common glue, it joins together the parts of wood stronger than the wood itself is united, so that the pieces thus joined will break in any other part sooner than where they are glued together. It is also remarkable that, if sawdust or powdered wood be made into a ball with this glue, the ball will prove solid and elastic, so that it may be turned and used as a bowl without breaking. As the glue thus made with brandy will keep long without corrupting, it is by no means an improper form to preserve isinglass ready dissolved, for fining wines and other purposes. Another use of this curious glue is that of its serving excellently for taking off impressions of metals or coins. Thus, if a little of it, when melted, be poured thinly on a new guinea, etc., so as to cover the whole surface of the piece, and suffered so to remain a day or two, till it become thoroughly dry, it will appear hard and transparent, like a piece of Muscovy glass, with the impression of the guinea in integral, as it is denominated on one side, and in relievio on the other. This glue dries into a very strong, tough, and transparent substance, not easily damaged to anything but aqueous moisture, which would soon dissolve it. This last reason renders it unfit for any use where it would be much exposed to wet or damp air. Common glue, dissolved with linseed oil, is admirably calculated to stand the weather, a secret little known by those who would be most benefited by its adoption. Norfolk Milk Punch. Steep the thin parings of 7 lemons and as many Seville oranges in a pint of brandy for 3 days. Then squeeze all the juice of these oranges and lemons into the brandy, and add 3 pints of rum, 3 pints more of brandy, and 6 pints of water. Grate a nutmeg into 2 quarts of milk, and having made it boiling hot, Pour it into the above ingredients, carefully keeping the whole well stirred till completely mixed. Then add 2 pounds of fine loaf sugar, which must also be well stirred. Let the punch thus made stand 12 hours. Then strain it through a flannel bag till it appear perfectly bright. It may probably require to be 3 or 4 times strained, according to the fineness or coarseness of the sugar and other circumstances. When quite clear, this charming liquor is immediately fit to drink, or will keep, if bottled, any length of time and in all climates. Art of making the curious sympathetic ink. This curious ink has been long known in the world, but the manner of preparing it and means of procuring the materials as described in various chemical books rendered the task too discouraging to be often attempted. By the following easy method, however, it is readily accomplishable. Take 1.5 ounces of zaffre, which may be obtained at any color shop, and put it into a glass vessel with a narrow and long neck, pouring over it 1 ounce measure of strong nitrous acid, diluted with 5 times the quantity of water. Keep it in a warm situation, but not too hot, for about 10 or 12 hours, and then decant the clearest part of the liquor. Having so done, pour nearly as much more diluted nitrous acid on the remainder, which is to continue in the same situation, and for as long a time as before, and then be decanted and mixed with what was obtained by the first operation. This being done, dissolve it in 2 ounces of common salt, and the sympathetic ink is completely made. The property of this ink is that the writing made with it, on common paper, is legible only while the paper is hot and dry, so that by exposing it alternatively to the ambient air and to the heat of a fire or burning sun, whatever is written may be caused to appear and disappear at pleasure. The universal knowledge of this secret rather diminishes than increases the security of guilt in using it for any improper purpose, since detection is certain from the moment suspicion takes place by simply holding every letter or other doubtful paper to the fire or in the warm rays of the sun. Soft sealing wax for impressing seals of office, etc. This sealing wax, which is seldom used for any other purpose than that of receiving the impressions of seals of office to charters, patents, proceedings in chancery, etc., is prepared, when to be used white, or rather uncolored, by mixing 1/2 pound of beeswax, 1.5 ounces of turpentine, and 1/2 ounce of sweet oil, and carefully boiling them together till the compound becomes of a fit consistency for molding into rolls, cakes, or balls for use. If color be wanted, it is readily obtained by stirring into the melted mass about 1/2 ounce of a proper pigment, as in making the red or other colored hard sealing wax. Capital sugar vinegar. This useful article of domestic economy might easily be made in the poorest families. To every quart of spring water, put 1/4 pound of the coarsest sugar. Boil them together and keep skimming the liquor as long as any scum rises. After pouring it into a tub or other vessel, let it stand till cool enough to work, and then place in it a toast spread with yeast of a size proportioned to the quantity made. Let it ferment a day or 2, then beat the yeast into it. Put it into a keg or barrel with a piece of tile or slate over the bunghole, and place it in a situation where it may best receive the heat of the sun. Make it in March or the beginning of April, and it will be fit for use in July or August. If not sour enough, which can seldom happen when properly managed, let it stand a month longer before it be bottled off. It may be kept in stone or glass bottles. During the time of making, it must never be disturbed after the first week or 10 days. and though in very fine weather the bunghole would be best left open all day, as it might be fatal to leave it open a single night, or exposed to any sudden rain, the greatest caution will in that case be necessary. Previously to its being bottled, it may be drawn off into a fresh cask, and, if it fill a large barrel, a handful of shred isinglass may be thrown in, or less in proportion to the quantity. This, after it has stood a few days, will render the vinegar fine, when it may be drawn off or bottled for use. This sugar vinegar, though very strong, may be used in pickling for sea store or exportation, without being at all lowered. But for pickles to be eaten in England, it will bear mixing with at least an equal quantity of cold spring water. There are few pickles for which this vinegar need ever be boiled. Without boiling, it will keep walnuts very finely, even for the East or West Indies. But then, as remarked in general of pickles for foreign use, it must be unmixed with water. If much vinegar be made, so as to require expensive casks, the outsides should always be painted for the sake of preserving them from the influence of the weather during so many months of exposure to sun and rain. Excellent embrocation for the whooping cough. All the dreadful consequences of the chin or whooping cough and its commonly tedious duration may be obviated and shortened by the following admirable remedy. Mix well together half an ounce each of spirit of hartshorn and oil of amber, with which plentifully anoint the palms of the hands, the pit of the stomach, the soles of the feet, the armpits, and the backbone, every morning and evening for a month, suffering no water to come near the parts thus anointed, though the fingers and backs of the hands may be wiped with a damp cloth. It should be rubbed in near the fire, and care naturally used to prevent afterwards taking cold. It is best to make only the above quantity at a time, because by frequently opening the bottle, much of the virtue will be lost. It should, by rights, be kept in a glass stopper bottle. Indeed, the hartshorn is always thus kept by the faculty, and where it forms so large a part of the mixture, the necessity of preventing its effluvia from escaping is equally great. These precautions taken, and the other directions followed, its use will seldom fail to be attended with the most complete success, frequently in a much shorter time than is judged prudent to advise its being continued, as it can never possibly do the smallest injury even to the tenderest infants. Speedy cure for a sprain. Take a large spoonful of honey, the same quantity of salt, and the white of an egg. Beat the whole up together incessantly for 2 hours, then let it stand an hour, and anoint the place sprained with the oil which will be produced, keeping the part well rolled with a good bandage. This is said generally to have enabled persons with sprained ankles, frequently more tediously cured than even a broken limb, and often leaving a perpetual weakness in the joint, to walk, in 24 hours, entirely free from pain. Singular and simple manner of preserving apples from the effects of frosts in North America. Apples being produced almost abundantly in North America, and forming an article of chief necessity in almost every family, the greatest care is constantly taken to protect them from frost at the earliest commencement of the winter season, it being well known that apples, if left unprotected, are inevitably destroyed by the first frost which occurs. This desirable object, during their long and severe winters, is said to be completely effected by only throwing over them a thin linen cloth before the approach of frost, when the fruit is never injured, how severe soever the winter may happen to prove. Yet apples are there usually kept in a small apartment immediately beneath the roof of the house, which is particularly appropriated to that purpose, and where there is never any fire. This is a fact so well known that the Americans are astonished should appear at all wonderful, and they have some reason to be so when it is considered that, throughout Germany, the same method of preserving fruit is universally practiced, from whence probably it made its way to North America. It appears that linen cloth only is used for this purpose, woolen cloth in particular having been experienced to prove ineffectual. There seems abundant reason to believe that even potatoes might be protected from frost by some such simple expedient. This also, like the preceding article, to which the principle seems so very analogous, merits high consideration, and for the same important reason, its capability of conducing to the universal benefit of mankind and the numerous animals under our protection. Cure for chilblains. If, before any inflammation take place, the feet or hands affected are well washed morning and evening with hot water, or even with cold water on going to bed, it will generally stop their progress, especially if warm socks or gloves be constantly worn. But when they are actually inflamed, dip a 4 times folded rag into a mixture composed of 4 ounces of spirits of wine and camphor, and 1 ounce of Venice treacle, which must be tied every night on the chilblains till they quite disappear. With these precautions they will seldom or never be found to ulcerate, or, as it is commonly called, to break. When this happens, dissolve an ounce of common turpentine in the yolk of an egg, and mix it up into a balsam, with but an ounce of lamp black, or even soot, and a drachm of oil, or spirits of turpentine. Spread this balsam on a plugget of lint large enough entirely to cover the ulcer. Tie it on with warm cloths over the part affected, and renew the dressings every morning and evening, which will speedily effect a cure. Soft leather socks, if worn before the first approach of winter, in October at the farthest, and never suffered to get wet or hard, will generally preserve from chilblains even those who are most subject to be troubled with them. Delicate cream cheese. Take to every quart of new milk a gill of cream. Make the mixture slightly warm, and put into it as little rennet as may be necessary, just to turn it. The curd being come, to use the language of the dairy, lay a cloth on the vat or mold, which may be the bottom of a sieve, but should be the exact size of the intended cheese. Then cutting out the curd with a skimming dish, fill up the mold, turn the cloth over it, and leave it to drain. As the curd drains and settles, keep filling in more with a gentle pressure till all the whey is out, and there is sufficient substance for the cheese. It must be then turned into a dry cloth, and pressed with a moderate weight, not exceeding 2 pounds. At night it is to be turned into a clean cloth, and the next morning very lightly sprinkled with fine salt, after which, if sufficiently dry, it may be laid on a bed of fresh nettle, strawberry, or ash leaves, covered over with more, and being shifted and turned twice a day, having the leaves occasionally renewed, will, in less than a fortnight, be sufficiently ripened for eating. If expedition be desirable, the maturity of the cheese may be considerably hastened by keeping it in a warm place between 2 pewter dishes, and giving it a fresh bed and covering of leaves every day. End of Part 75. End of Modern Domestic Cookery by William Augustus Henderson.